The truth about love and status, a shocking social experiment. The evening was set for elegance. A grand chandelier cast a golden glow over the long mahogany dining table, where crystal glasses sparkled and silverware gleamed under the soft candlelight. Laughter and murmurs of high society conversations filled the air, a melody of wealth and privilege. At the far end of the table, Olivia, a striking blonde in an emerald green dress, leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine in her glass with an air of boredom. Across from her sat Marcus, her boyfriend, tall, handsome, and effortlessly charming. He was the heir to a multi-million-dollar business empire, a self-made success in his own right. A maid moved silently behind Olivia, refilling glasses with the precision of someone who had served the wealthy for years. But something about her was different. She carried herself with an unmistakable grace, her movements deliberate, her eyes sharp, too sharp for a mere servant. Olivia barely glanced at the woman, dismissing her as just another staff member meant to blend into the background. When the maid refilled her glass, a single drop of wine splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. Olivia let out an exaggerated sigh and rolled her eyes. "Really?" she scoffed. "I swear, they just let anyone in these days. Do they even train the help anymore?" The room fell into an uneasy silence. A few guests exchanged glances, uncomfortable but unwilling to speak up. Marcus, sitting beside Olivia, stiffened slightly, but he forced a polite smile. The maid, however, remained composed. She took a step back, bowing her head slightly. "My apologies, ma'am." "Apologies won't clean the mess, will they?" Olivia huffed. "You know what? You should be grateful to be here at all." She reached for her glass, a smirk playing on her lips. And then, in one slow, deliberate motion, she tilted it forward, watching as the deep red wine poured over the maid's head, staining her crisp white uniform. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The maid didn't move. She didn't flinch. The red liquid dripped from her tightly wound curls, soaking into the fabric of her dress, but her expression remained calm. Marcus bolted to his feet. "Olivia." His voice was sharp, disbelieving. "What?" Olivia said, feigning innocence. She was being careless. If she can't handle a simple task, maybe she should. "Enough," Marcus cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. But the maid, she only smiled. It was a small, knowing smile, one that sent a ripple of unease through the entire room. She reached up, gently dabbing at the wine trickling down her face with a linen napkin. Then, with a quiet dignity that made Olivia's act seem all the more grotesque, she turned to Marcus and spoke for the first time that night. "Son," she said. The entire table went silent. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He felt the floor tilt beneath him, his heart hammering against his ribs. No, it couldn't be. But as he looked closer, really looked, at the woman standing before him, drenched in wine yet standing tall, the truth hit him like a freight train. This wasn't just a maid. This was his mother. Marcus could still hear the murmurs from the dining hall, the clinking of glasses, the whispers of guests trying to make sense of what had just happened. But he couldn't focus on any of it. His mother. His own mother, Evelyn Carter, the woman who had raised him, fought for him, sacrificed everything to give him a life of privilege, had just stood before him, drenched in wine, humiliated in front of their elite circle. And Olivia? She had done it with a smirk. Marcus's mind raced as he followed his mother down the hallway, his feet moving before his brain could catch up. Evelyn walked with a quiet dignity, her back straight, her posture unwavering, despite the deep stain soaking through her uniform. She reached the grand staircase at the far end of the house, the soft glow of the chandelier above them casting an eerie light on the moment. Without turning around, she spoke. "I assume you knew." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Knew what?" Evelyn finally turned to face him. Despite the mess on her clothes, she was composed, her eyes steady. That she was like this. His chest tightened. He wanted to say no, wanted to argue that Olivia wasn't cruel, just misunderstood. But that would be a lie. He had known. He had seen the little signs, the way she snapped at waitstaff when her order wasn't perfect, the way she looked down on the doorman at his apartment building, the way she spoke about those kinds of people whenever they passed someone struggling on the street. He had told himself it wasn't a big deal, that she was raised in a different world, that she didn't mean it. But tonight, there were no excuses left. Evelyn let out a soft sigh, breaking the silence between them. I had to know for sure. Marcus frowned. Know what? If she was worthy of you. His heart pounded. Mom, what are you saying? Evelyn held his gaze. That girl, she shook her head. She loves your money. She loves your status. But she does not love you. The words cut deep. He wanted to protest. Wanted to tell her that Olivia had been there for him, that she was beautiful and smart, that she had introduced him to the most influential circles. But Evelyn wasn't finished. You were raised to respect people, Marcus, she continued, her voice steady but firm. I don't care how much money you have, how successful you become, if you let a woman like that into your life, you will lose the most important part of yourself. Marcus swallowed hard. His mother had always been his greatest influence, his guiding star. When his father walked out on them, it was Evelyn who worked double shifts as a housekeeper, who put food on the table, who made sure he went to the best schools. And now she had stood in his own house, wearing a maid's uniform, just to prove a point. A point she had clearly proven. His stomach churned as memories flooded back. Olivia had been everything he thought he wanted. The way she fit effortlessly into high society. The way she looked on his arm at charity galas, how people admired them as a power couple. But was it real? Or had he just been blinded by the illusion of it all? Evelyn reached out, gently touching his face, just like she used to when he was a boy. Son, she whispered. You deserve better. Marcus felt his throat tighten again. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure what to say. Behind them, the sound of heels clicking against marble made them both turn. Olivia stood in the hallway, arms crossed, her expression a mix of anger and confusion. What the hell is going on? She snapped. Marcus, why are you acting like this is my fault? Marcus turned fully toward her, his pulse hammering in his ears. His mother's words still echoed in his mind. She does not love you. For the first time, he believed it. Marcus stared at Olivia, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. The woman who stood before him was no stranger. He had known her for nearly 2 years, shared intimate moments, whispered dreams of a future together. And yet, at this moment, she felt like a complete stranger. His mother's words echoed in his mind, she does not love you. For the first time, he truly saw Olivia for who she was, not just a charming, well-dressed woman who fit seamlessly into high society, but someone who believed she was above others, someone who had just humiliated his mother in the cruelest way possible. And she didn't even care. Marcus, Olivia scoffed, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder. Why are you looking at me like that? Don't tell me you're actually upset over some maid. Marcus's stomach twisted. Some maid. His mother was standing right there. Evelyn Carter, the woman who had scrubbed floors, cooked meals, and worked herself to the bone so that he could have a better life, reduced to some maid in Olivia's eyes. Say that again, Marcus said, his voice dangerously low. Olivia rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. You're making this bigger than it is. I didn't even do anything that bad. She got wine on her dress. She'll wash it. Marcus took a slow, deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. But he could see the shift in his mother's expression. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't hurt. She had expected this. This was why she had done all of this. She knew Olivia wasn't a good person. And she needed Marcus to see it with his own eyes. You don't even realize what you've done, do you? Marcus said, his voice cold. Olivia threw up her hands in frustration. For God's sake, Marcus. Why are we still talking about this? This is ridiculous. She's just a servant. That's her job. If she can't handle it, she shouldn't be here. Evelyn finally spoke. And what makes you think you deserve to be here? The question was simple, yet it sliced through the air like a blade. Olivia turned to Evelyn, her face contorting in disbelief. Excuse me? You heard me, Evelyn said, her voice smooth and controlled. You've been dating my son for nearly 2 years. You've enjoyed his wealth, his influence, his connections. And yet, in all that time, you never once respected where he came from. You never once respected me. Olivia let out a sharp laugh. Oh, this is rich. Are you actually trying to lecture me right now? A maid? Marcus took a step forward, his presence looming over Olivia. She's not a maid, Olivia, he said, his voice like ice. She's my mother. Silence. It was the kind of silence that could crush a person, heavy with realization. Olivia's face paled. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She glanced between Marcus and Evelyn, searching for some kind of joke, some way to pretend this wasn't happening. But Marcus wasn't smiling. And Evelyn? She looked almost amused. You, Olivia started, then stopped, her hands clenching into fists. This was a test? Evelyn raised an eyebrow. You could call it that. You set me up? Olivia hissed, stepping closer to Marcus. You knew she was pretending to be a maid, and you just let me. What? Marcus cut in, tilting his head slightly. Let you show me exactly who you are. Olivia's breath hitched. She was scrambling now, her mind racing to find a way out. Marcus, she said, switching tactics, softening her voice, stepping closer as if she could smooth over what had just happened. You know me. You know I love you. Marcus didn't move. You love what I can give you, he corrected. Not me. Olivia's expression twisted. That's not fair. Isn't it? Evelyn interjected. You didn't hesitate for a second before treating me like trash. You assumed I was beneath you. And you were comfortable with that. Tell me, Olivia, if I wasn't Marcus's mother, would you have ever apologized? Olivia swallowed hard. She didn't answer. And that was all the answer they needed. Marcus let out a slow breath, his hands curling into fists at his sides. He had made excuses for Olivia for too long. He had ignored the signs, convinced himself that she would change. But this was who she was. I want you out of my house, he said finally. Olivia's eyes widened. Marcus. Now. Her breath came out in short, sharp gasps. You're breaking up with me? Marcus nodded once. Yes. She let out a bitter laugh. Over this? Marcus's jaw tightened. No. Because I finally see the kind of person you are. And I don't want you in my life. For the first time, Olivia looked genuinely panicked. Marcus, please, let's just talk about this. You've said enough, Evelyn cut in. And so have your actions. Olivia turned to Evelyn, her eyes narrowing. You did this, she spat. You wanted this to happen. You wanted him to leave me. Evelyn didn't flinch. I wanted him to see the truth. And now he has. Olivia let out a frustrated scream, grabbing her purse off the nearest chair. You're both crazy. You're making a huge mistake, Marcus. You'll regret this. But Marcus only stared at her, unmoving, as she stormed past him, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. The front door slammed behind her. Silence. Marcus felt like he could finally breathe. His mother, still standing tall, studied him for a long moment. Then, with a knowing smile, she reached up and wiped a lingering drop of wine from her cheek. That, she said, was long overdue. For the first time that night, Marcus let out a quiet laugh. He shook his head, then pulled his mother into a tight embrace. Thank you, he whispered. Evelyn simply smiled. "Now come on," she said, pulling back. "We have better company to keep tonight." And with that, they walked away, leaving behind nothing but the shattered illusion Olivia had once built. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Olivia stood with her arms crossed, lips pursed in frustration, her chest rising and falling as she tried to gather herself. But Marcus could see it. This wasn't the face of a woman feeling remorse. This was a woman scrambling for control. She still thought she could talk her way out of this. "Marcus," she finally said, lowering her voice to that sweet, persuasive tone she always used when she wanted to get her way. "You're overreacting. I mean, come on, don't you see what's happening here?" This was a setup. Marcus tilted his head slightly, watching her. "A setup," he repeated. "Yes," Olivia exclaimed, her voice gaining confidence. "Your mother," she nearly spat the word, "pretended to be a maid just to trap me. This wasn't fair. I wasn't prepared for some kind of ridiculous test." Marcus let out a humorless laugh. "A test," he said. "You think my mother forced you to treat her like garbage?" Olivia's eyes flickered. "That's not what I meant." Marcus took a step closer. "Tell me," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "If she was just a maid, if she wasn't my mother, would you have ever apologized?" Olivia's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Marcus nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." The air was electric now, charged with an intensity Olivia wasn't prepared for. For the first time since this started, he saw something new in her expression: panic. She knew she was losing him. "Marcus, please," she said, her voice wavering now. "We can talk about this. Let's go upstairs, away from all these people, and just—" "We are talking about it," Marcus interrupted. He turned slightly, looking at the stunned guests still seated around the dining table. Some of them were frozen, wine glasses half raised, eyes darting between Marcus, Olivia, and Evelyn. Others looked away, pretending not to witness the downfall of a woman they had once admired. Then, he did something Olivia didn't expect. He reached for his mother's hand. The room collectively exhaled. Evelyn, calm as ever, laced her fingers through her son's and gave a knowing squeeze. And that one small action, the kind of respect Olivia had never shown, was more powerful than anything Marcus could have said. Olivia saw it too. Her expression twisted. "Marcus," she said, her voice sharp now. "Are you seriously throwing away us over this? Over her?" Marcus turned back to Olivia, shaking his head slightly. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, almost sounding disappointed. "There was no us." "Not really. There was you, and everything you thought you could take from me." Olivia's nostrils flared. "You are so dramatic." "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But at least I'm not cruel." Olivia scoffed, shaking her head. "I knew this would happen. The moment your mother came into the picture, I knew she'd find a way to turn you against me." Evelyn smiled, folding her arms. "Sweetheart, you turned him against yourself." The guests stifled their gasps, watching in horrified fascination. "Marcus," Olivia tried again, her voice desperate now. "Do you think any of these people actually care about you? Do you think they'd be here if you weren't rich? If you weren't Marcus Carter?" Marcus sighed, shaking his head. "And there it is," he said softly. "The real you. The woman who sees everything, everyone, as just another piece in her game." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small, velvet box, and tossed it onto the table. Olivia's eyes widened. "What is that?" Marcus stared at her, unblinking. "That," he said, "is the engagement ring I was planning to give you next month." A murmur rippled through the room. For the first time, Olivia actually stumbled back a step. "Why, you were going to—" "Not anymore," Marcus said. Olivia's hands balled into fists. "Marcus, I love you." "No, Olivia," Marcus said, his voice final. "You love what I could do for you." Her chest rose and fell in sharp, furious breaths. Then, before she could stop herself, she grabbed a glass of wine from the table, dark, rich red, and in one swift motion, hurled it at Marcus. But Marcus didn't move. Because just as the glass left her hand, a firm, steady arm shot out and caught it. Evelyn. Her grip was strong, unshaken. The wine never reached Marcus. The entire room froze. Evelyn exhaled slowly, lowering the glass back onto the table without spilling a single drop. Then she looked up at Olivia, her gaze unwavering. "You have already lost, my dear," Evelyn said softly. "Don't embarrass yourself further." And just like that, Olivia knew. She had nothing left. Her breath hitched, her nails digging into her palms. Then, with a furious shriek, she spun on her heel, grabbed her purse, and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this, Marcus," she spat, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. "You'll come crawling back." Marcus didn't reply. He just watched as she disappeared. The door slammed behind her. Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate clapping. Marcus turned. His mother was clapping, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips. "That," she said, "was long overdue." Marcus let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. "You always know, don't you?" Evelyn patted his cheek lightly. "Mothers always do." The guests, awkward and unsure, slowly began to murmur amongst themselves again, some pretending the entire scene hadn't happened. A few of Marcus's true friends gave him nods of respect, while others exchanged glances, likely thinking about their own shallow relationships. But Marcus? He felt lighter than he had in years. "Come on, son," Evelyn said, linking her arm through his. "Let's go have dessert somewhere with better company." And with that, they walked away from the ruins Olivia had left behind. Justice had been served. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The guests sat frozen in their seats, some gripping their wine glasses, others darting nervous glances between Marcus, Olivia, and the woman she had just humiliated. Evelyn stood tall, despite the red wine soaking into her uniform, her face unreadable. Marcus had never seen her look so calm, so in control, even after being openly disrespected in front of an entire room of wealthy elites. Olivia, on the other hand, still hadn't realized what was happening. She was standing with one hand on her hip, her other hand gesturing in irritation, as if she were the victim. "You know what?" Olivia scoffed. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this nonsense. If this," she motioned vaguely at Evelyn, her lip curled in distaste, "wants to play mind games, that's her business. But I'm done." She turned to Marcus, expecting him to follow her lead, as he always had. But this time, he didn't move. She frowned. "Marcus?" Slowly, he stood. He was taller than her by nearly a foot, and for the first time since she met him, she felt small. "Sit down, Olivia," he said, his voice quiet, but firm. Olivia blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one dared speak. Marcus exhaled, his pulse pounding, his chest tight. This was it. No more avoiding it. No more pretending. He turned to his mother, who met his gaze with something almost like pride. Then he turned back to Olivia. "This woman," Marcus said, nodding toward Evelyn, "isn't just a maid." Olivia scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, really? What, is she the head of staff? Your family's longtime housekeeper? What am I supposed to be impressed by?" Evelyn let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. But Marcus didn't smile. "No, Olivia," he said. "She's my mother." Silence. The entire table collectively stopped breathing. Olivia's eyes widened. "What?" Marcus stepped forward, his voice even, his gaze unwavering. "This is my mother, Evelyn Carter. The woman you just poured wine on." The woman you've spent the entire night treating like dirt. Olivia actually stumbled back a step. She looked at Evelyn again, her mind racing, desperately trying to process what she had just heard. But nothing about Evelyn had changed. She still stood there, perfectly composed, watching Olivia with the kind of amusement one might have while observing a spoiled child throw a tantrum. "No, that's not possible," Olivia stammered. "You told me your mother," she stopped, blinking rapidly. "You told me your mother was a businesswoman." Marcus's jaw clenched. "She is." Olivia gaped at him. "But she's wearing a maid's uniform." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "And? Does that change who she is? Does it change who I am?" Olivia's lips parted, but she had no answer. Marcus let out a slow breath. "I wanted to believe you loved me, Olivia. I really did. But what you just did..." He shook his head. "You showed me exactly who you are." Olivia swallowed hard, panic setting in. "Marcus," she started, her tone shifting, becoming softer, sweeter, like she was trying to reel him back in. "Baby, I didn't know. If I had known, I never would have." Marcus held up a hand, stopping her. "That's the problem, Olivia," he said. "If you had known she was my mother, you would have treated her with respect. But because you thought she was a maid, you had no problem humiliating her. That tells me everything I need to know." The realization crashed over Olivia like a wave. This wasn't just some misunderstanding. She had failed. And worse, she had failed in front of the very people whose approval she had always craved. The murmurs in the room were louder now. Some of the guests shook their heads in quiet disapproval. Others whispered behind their hands, sneaking glances at Olivia with thinly veiled judgment. This was the end. But Olivia wasn't one to go down without a fight. "So this was a test," she snapped, her voice shaking with rage. "Your mother set me up?" Evelyn finally spoke. Her voice was smooth, confident. "I didn't set you up, sweetheart," she said. "I simply gave you the opportunity to show Marcus the kind of woman you really are." Olivia let out a bitter laugh. "And you think you're so clever, don't you?" She turned to Marcus, desperation flashing in her eyes. "This isn't fair. You tricked me." Marcus tilted his head. "Tricked you into what, Olivia? Being a decent human being?" Olivia flinched. Evelyn smiled. "If you had any kindness in your heart, Olivia, you wouldn't be standing here, trying to justify what you did. You'd be apologizing." Olivia's fists clenched. She glanced around the room, realizing there was no way out. No one was coming to her defense. Not even the so-called friends she had once paraded Marcus in front of. They were all watching her fall. She felt sick. Marcus took a deep breath. "We're done, Olivia," he said, his voice final. Olivia's breath hitched. "Marcus, please," she tried again, her voice trembling. "You're going to throw everything away over this?" Marcus let out a short laugh. "Everything?" He shook his head. "The only thing I'm throwing away is a relationship built on lies." Tears of frustration welled in Olivia's eyes. She had lost. For a moment, she just stood there, her chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the dining hall. The door slammed behind her. Silence. And then, slowly, deliberately, Evelyn picked up her napkin, dabbing at the last bit of wine still clinging to her cheek. She turned to Marcus, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Well," she said, "that was satisfying." Marcus let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. "Yeah," he admitted. "It was." Evelyn linked her arm through his. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go find some real company." Together, they turned away, leaving behind nothing but the wreckage of Olivia's pride. And just like that, the truth had finally been revealed. Marcus had seen it. And now, he could never unsee it. The night air was crisp as Marcus and Evelyn stepped onto the balcony, leaving the lingering murmurs of the guests behind. The city skyline stretched before them, lights twinkling like scattered diamonds against the dark velvet sky. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt like he could breathe. His mother stood beside him, silent for a moment, before letting out a soft chuckle. "Well," she said, smoothing out the wrinkles on her now-stained dress, "that was entertaining." Marcus huffed out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "That's one way to put it." Evelyn turned to look at him, her gaze softer now, but still sharp. "I had to be sure, Marcus. I had to make sure you saw her for who she really was." "I know," Marcus admitted. "And I did." His voice was steady, but deep down, he felt something else, shame. Shame that it had taken him this long to see it. Shame that he had defended Olivia for so long, made excuses, turned a blind eye to the things he knew were wrong. Evelyn reached up and gently touched his face, just like she used to when he was a little boy. "You have nothing to be ashamed of," she said, reading his thoughts effortlessly. "The important thing is that you learned." Marcus swallowed hard and nodded. "Now tell me," Evelyn continued, tilting her head slightly. "Were you really going to propose to that girl?" Marcus sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. "I thought I was." Evelyn let out a dry chuckle. "Well, I suppose that would have made an interesting wedding." Marcus groaned. "Mom." "I'm just saying," Evelyn said with a smirk. "Better to see the truth now than after saying I do to a woman who would have drained you dry." Marcus exhaled slowly. She was right. He had dodged a disaster. As they stood in comfortable silence, the sounds of the party still murmuring behind them, Marcus turned to his mother. "You didn't have to do all this, you know," he said quietly. "You could have just told me." Evelyn smiled knowingly. "And would you have listened?" Marcus hesitated. She already knew the answer. "That's what I thought," she said. They stood there for a while longer, the weight of the night settling in. Then Evelyn clapped her hands together. "Well, I don't know about you, but I'm starving," she announced. "Let's get out of here." Marcus chuckled. "Where to?" "There's a little diner down on 5th that still serves the best peach cobbler in town," Evelyn said with a grin. "And real people." Marcus felt his chest warm at the mention of the small diner they used to visit when he was a kid, back when money was tight, but love was plentiful. "Sounds perfect," he said. They left the mansion behind, stepping into the night, leaving behind the remnants of a world that had, for too long, blinded Marcus to what really mattered. Justice had been served. And as they sat in that small, homey diner, sharing warm peach cobbler and laughter, Marcus knew one thing for certain. He was finally free. At its core, this story is about the power of character over status, and the undeniable truth that wealth and privilege mean nothing without integrity and respect. It serves as a reminder that how we treat people, especially those we believe can do nothing for us, reveals who we truly are. Olivia's downfall wasn't about a single mistake, it was about a pattern of entitlement, a belief that some people are beneath her. Marcus's journey reflects something many of us learn over time. Love isn't just about admiration or attraction, it's about values, about who stands beside us with honesty, kindness, and humility. Evelyn's wisdom represents the experience of those who have seen the world for what it is, who understand that protecting loved ones sometimes means letting them learn hard lessons. For those of us who have lived long enough to see relationships rise and fall, this story reinforces an important truth: real love, real friendship, and real success come not from wealth or appearances, but from the quiet strength of those who choose to stand with us when the world isn't watching. It's a lesson that, no matter our age, remains as relevant as ever.